Speaker. That answer will be of very little comfort to Northern Irish veterans across the country, including the veteran from Tariff in my constituency who contacted me about this just last week. They are living in fear of vexatious claims, and I'm sure the Secretary of State recognises that. So why is the government delaying bringing this legislation back to the House?
So say
to the honourable member, first of all, there's no such thing as a vexatious prosecution, because for that argument to be advanced, which others have done in the House, one is saying that independent prosecutors bring prosecutions for vexation or politically motivated reasons, and that is not the case. When it comes to civil claims, the last government in its legislation left 800 civil claims against the MOD in place. The last government left them in place, and it's almost unknown for an individual veteran to be called to give evidence in such cases.
Claire Hammer.
One of the lingering legacies of violence in Northern Ireland is our outrageous and distressing levels of violence against women and girls in the echo of menace and threat that still exists in Northern Ireland. The murders this month of Ellie Flanagan and Amy Doherty bring to the number of 33 of women and girls who've been murdered by men they know. We grieve with their families, and we commend the family of Natalie McNally, who with decency and dignity finally got justice for that murder. Is the Secretary of State confident in all that he's doing on legacy, that all possible levers are being used to tackle the disease of misogyny, including through Northern Ireland hate crime legislation?
Well, I join my honourable friend in what she says about the recent conviction of the brutal murder of Natalie McNally and the deaths of Amy Doherty and Ellie Flanagan that have occurred. It is a source of enormous sadness and I would hope shame that Northern Ireland is the one part of the United Kingdom where it is most dangerous to be a woman when it comes to violence against women and girls. One of the things that we are doing in the Troubles Bill is we are closing the loophole that was contained in the previous government's legislation. There will now be a means of investigating any sexual-related offences that occurred during the period of the Troubles. If they meet the threshold for investigation by the Commission will investigate, but otherwise, once the bill is passed, it will fall to the PSNI to look into the case.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What reassurance can the Secretary of State give me and my constituent in Harlow that the health and well-being of veterans will be taken into account if they are required to give evidence to the Commission or coroners?
Well, we've already made that clear in the protections that we have announced that are contained within the bill, including the right to give evidence remotely, application for anonymity and no cold calling, and they have been welcomed by veterans that we're planning to put them in place.
Alex Burkhardt, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Secretary of State says there's no such thing as vexatious prosecutions. I think he would do well to remember the cases of Phil Shiner. In 1991, the SAS shot and killed 3 members of the IRA's East Tyrone Brigade in Cope. The coroner originally found that the soldiers' use of force was reasonable and proportionate, and that the IRA men in question had the intent to murder. A judicial review was brought against these findings, but in October last year it was thrown out by the High Court in Belfast, with the judge saying that the case was, and I quote, ludicrous and utterly divorced from reality. This morning we hear depressingly that that case is to continue 35 years after the incident and after the soldier in question has been investigated for years. How can the Secretary of State think that this is right?
Well, any citizen of the United Kingdom, as the honourable member is well aware, has a right to bring a judicial review against any decision that has been made. It is for the courts to determine that. I would join with him, having seen what the original judge said in throwing out the case, that given the fact that the inquest found that the use of force in that case was lawful, perhaps it's not surprising that the judge threw out as having no merit whatsoever. If the case is continuing, we will have to leave it to the judicial process to decide what happens, but I have confidence in our courts.
Alex Burke.
Look, doesn't this case absolutely exemplify why the government's solution is entirely wrong? It reopens the door to vexatious litigation, which allows our veterans to be dragged through the courts, even when the courts themselves say that the case is ludicrous. And it also exposes the absurdity of the fact that legal aid is paying for these challenges against our veterans. We are all literally paying for lawyers to bring vexatious litigation against our troops. The government seems rightly to have paused its bill. Will it please use this opportunity to think again and take a new approach which guarantees that there are genuine protections for those who serve?
Well, there, I can assure the honourable gentleman there will be genuine protections. On the question of legal aid in Northern Ireland, that is a matter, as he well knows, for the Northern Ireland Executive. Given the case that he has cited, I was not aware that the last government at any point considered removing the right to bring judicial review against any decisions at all. If he's now advancing the argument that judicial review should not be available in certain cases, well, I would say good luck to him, because it is a foundation of our legal system.
Paul Curlin, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On a recent visit to Northern Ireland, I met with numerous stakeholders, including veterans, victims and survivors, all of whom are seeking justice. Yet I fear both the former Legacy Act and the current Troubles Bill conceive of justice too narrowly, via the constricting lens of lawyers preoccupied with criminal sanctions and civil compensation. Stakeholders want answers, not retribution. That is why I've tabled amendments to the Troubles Bill to formally provide the option of a restorative justice pathway for the many victims of the Troubles who simply want to know what happened. Does the Secretary of State agree that restorative justice has an important role to play in reconciliation, and will he meet with me to discuss supporting my amendments?
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm always happy to meet with the honourable gentleman, and the House will have an opportunity in due course to consider the amendments that he has put down. Most of the victims that I've met, I'm sure that the same is true for the victims and families that he has met, are looking for answers. Most of them recognise that with the passage of time, the prospect of prosecutions of anybody are diminishing rapidly, and the purpose, part of the focus of the Commission, is to help those families to find answers. How families are then reconciled to the terrible loss that they have suffered, in the end, it will be for each family to find their own way of doing that.
Gavin Robbins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The Secretary of State and the Labour Government promised the people of Northern Ireland that they would repeal and replace the Legacy Act. They have not. They promised through this 2-year extended parliamentary session that they would deliver legislation that attained support across the community. They have not. It is delayed at the moment because of discord amongst his own benches. What does he say to the victims of Northern Ireland who want to see progress?
Well, I say very simply that the government is keen to progress this. It is a very complex, as the right honourable gentleman knows, it's a very complex piece of legislation, because in part it is having to fix the mess that the Legacy Act 2023 left with this government to deal with. I make no apology for taking time to make sure that we get the legislation right, because as he knows, this is the last best hope we have.
Gavin Robbins.
The Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee has just heard from the Chief Constable of the PSNI, John Boucher, who indicated that he, the Secretary of State, has put in a claim to Treasury for an additional hundreds of millions of pounds to fund the Legacy Commission, but yet the PSNI has nothing. They have £200 million of civil liability cases with them. They have no resources to progress. Even if they were asked for information, they couldn't provide it. Does he recognise there's a legacy funding deficit within the PSNI, and will he too similarly seek money for them?
Well, I would say to the right honourable gentleman that the creation of the Legacy Commission took away from the PSNI some 1,000 cases. 1,000 cases that it fell to them to investigate, and that cost has been transferred to the Legacy Commission. Whoever is investigating them, whatever the system is, they will have to be looked into, and when they are looked into, disclosure will be required.
Paul Forster.
Question number 3, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I will answer questions 3, 10 and 11 together. On the 10th of April, we will celebrate the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, which nearly 30 years ago brought an end to the Troubles and enabled Northern Ireland to establish a power-sharing government. In the years since, Northern Ireland has been transformed, and I look forward to working with everyone to make further progress.
Paul Foster.
We approach the anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement historic in that it ultimately delivered peace for a generation. With the knowledge that it requires constant political cooperation and public support, its biggest challenge, no doubt, is the Tory reform policy of leaving the ECHR. If the UK left the ECHR, it would undermine a core principle of the agreement. Does the Secretary of State agree that there are some within this chamber that would wholly compromise the peace in Northern Ireland for short-lived, ill-judged political gain?
So, State.
Well, I do agree with my honourable friend, and I do not understand why some are advocating removing the ECHR from the Good Friday Agreement. It would be highly irresponsible, and I think it shows a complete lack of understanding about what the agreement involved, because you cannot just walk in and pull out one of its pillars for the sake of party ideology.
That's a good tell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Good Friday Agreement was a landmark achievement of the last Labour government, and it is a beacon of hope for conflict-affected states around the world. Now, before coming into this place, I had the privilege of witnessing and experiencing Northern Ireland young people's leadership in this area, where they shared their experiences and the lessons from the Good Friday Agreement. So with that in mind, can the Secretary of State tell me what he is doing to share the UK's expertise and to ensure that others affected by conflict can benefit from it as well?
Secretary of State.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend. The biggest lesson of the Good Friday Agreement is it takes immense political courage to say yes rather than to go on saying no. And to pick up her point, back in the end of last year, the Foreign Secretary convened the Western Balkan countries under the Berlin process at Hillsborough Castle, and the First and Deputy First Minister talked through how Northern Ireland has made this extraordinary progress. One example of how the lessons of that agreement are being heard around the world.
Bill Rivera adding.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Good Friday Agreement recognised the importance of addressing the suffering of victims of the Troubles. Legislating for this remains unfinished business, as does the implementation of a border poll, for which there is significant support in the North. As we approach the anniversary, does the Secretary of State agree that it's time to take action on both?
Secretary of State.
I say to my honourable friend that the provisions relating to a border poll are very clearly set out in the Good Friday Agreement. There is one criterion that governs such a decision. There is no evidence at the moment that there is a majority for a constitutional change in Northern Ireland, and I commit to the House that I've done before, I will uphold in letter and spirit that bit of the Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah. Sir Julian.
Speaker, could I add to the tributes paid to the table clerk? In all of the advice he's given in the last 40 years, he gave particularly good advice on the meaningful vote, which left many of us traumatised, but he developed a great expertise in. As we celebrate the Good Friday Agreement, can I urge the Secretary of State to be crystal clear to the Northern Ireland Assembly and Northern Ireland politicians that there's going to be less money coming from GB, there needs to be revenue raising, and there needs to be a sole focus on economic growth for the next session of the Northern Ireland Assembly.
Well, I agree with the right honourable gentleman that economic growth is the answer to many of the questions that the Executive and the Assembly are facing. Northern Ireland, with its dual market access, has an extraordinary opportunity, along with its innovation and ingenuity. Being in government requires taking difficult decisions with the money you've got. We're giving a record settlement to the Executive. They have to decide how to spend it most effectively.
Jim Ellis.
As the Secretary of State talks up the Belfast Agreement, he of course ignores the fact that its primary pledge of no constitutional change without consent has been trashed by the Windsor framework, in that Article 6 of our Acts of Union, no less, has been suspended, and Northern Ireland in 300 areas is subject to foreign jurisdiction. That is constitutional change without consent. And more than that, the guarantee of cross-community support was removed in order to force through the 4-year extension of the protocol. So, surely the Secretary of State should realise that the Belfast Agreement has been hollowed out in order to promote the nationalist agenda, which he seems so ready to embrace.
Well, I don't accept the argument that the honourable gentleman advances, either in relation to the Good Friday Agreement. When it comes to the Windsor framework, those who advocated to leave the European Union didn't think about the consequences to entities, one open border, how you're going to ensure that goods that cross the border meet the rules of the respective entity. And that is what the Windsor framework is seeking to do. But the government is negotiating an SPS agreement with the EU, which has been widely welcomed by all parties across Northern Ireland.
Campbell.
Speaker, in any marking of the end of violence, does the Secretary of State agree with me that a key date is in fact 1994, when the main violence perpetrators, the IRA, finally woke up to the reality of their ranks being riddled with informants, were running out of options, and they declared a ceasefire. That was then followed by a loyalist paramilitary ceasefire doing likewise. But civilised society should never applaud or celebrate murderers ceasing doing what they never should have started in the first place.
Well, I say to the honourable gentleman, there was always an alternative to violence, always an alternative, and that recognition was finally reached when the Good Friday Agreement was negotiated and signed, and Northern Ireland has seen the benefit since. And it shows, as I indicated earlier, instead of saying no, which happened repeatedly on all sides, when you're finally prepared to compromise in the interests of peace, enormous benefits flow, in this case to Northern Ireland and elsewhere in the world.
Question number 4, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, we are indebted, all of us, to the men and women who serve in our police force, who day in, day out work to keep our communities safe. I know the PSNI purchased the site in the honourable member's constituency last year. He will obviously know that policing and justice is devolved, so the next steps are for the PSNI and the executive to discuss a way forward.
Would the Minister agree that policing in Northern Ireland has consistently showcased excellence with some of the most courageous public service anywhere in the UK, and that the development of a new police college on a 54-acre site at Hollywood represents a unique opportunity to build the expertise? Would he agree to a site meeting with me to discuss funding opportunities to develop that policing college in Northern Ireland?
No problem. Minister. I would be very happy to join the honourable member at that visit. He makes his case very powerfully. He pays rightfully tribute to the brave men and women who serve in our police, and I'm sure the executive will have heard his case for the PSNI as well.
Douglas McAllister.
Question number 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Northern Ireland will directly benefit from the spring forecast, with almost £390 million in additional funding to the executive over the next 3 years, including £231 million in 2026-27. This is money the executive could use to deliver on its priorities, including the transformation of public services and promoting economic growth.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The £379 million in Barnett consequentials announced by our Chancellor earlier this month is on top of the £370 million of extra funding announced in the budget, all in addition to the £19 billion of funding settlement announced at the spending review. So does the Minister agree with me that this record level of investment, and it's now for the executive to produce a balanced multi-year budget that will deliver for the people of Northern Ireland?
I do agree with my honourable friend. The government has taken a decision to enable, if the executive wishes to do so, to agree a multi-year budget. Discussions are taking place. We've had the open book exercise, and I hope that the Northern Ireland executive, given those considerable additional resources, will be able to find a way forward.
Sammy Wilson.
As a result of the government's mismanagement of the economy, the spring statement forecast that economic growth would go down, wage growth would go down, and also that we would have an increase in inflation, all of which will hit Northern Ireland more severely than other parts of the United Kingdom. Yet the government refuses to do anything about the massive costs of the Windsor framework, and has imposed from the 1st of July carbon taxes on sea transport across from GB to Northern Ireland, which will hit our economy even harder. Why is the government ignoring the real issues facing the Northern Ireland economy, both through its actions and its inactivity?
Go through.
Secretary of State. I don't accept the right honourable gentleman's characterisation of what the government is doing. It has brought economic stability to the country after the disaster of the previous government. It has given record support to the Northern Ireland Executive, and we are working through our negotiations with the EU to reduce the impact of the Windsor framework. The SPS agreement, as I said a moment ago, widely welcome across Northern Ireland, is a really good example of that.
Yes. Chair of the Select Committee, Tony Antoniazzi.
Mr. Speaker, while this funding in the spring statement is welcome, the Secretary of State told us that he was looking at alternative sources for funding of the charity sector because of the disappointment in Northern Ireland over the local growth fund split of 70-30. Could he update the House on his conversations?
Yes, I am working very hard together with the voluntary sector and I hope the Executive to find a way forward. There is £9 million available in resource to fund those schemes from the 1st of April. I held a meeting to encourage the voluntary sector to apply for a bid to Peace Plus, and with the considerable additional resources that have been made available to the Northern Ireland Executive, it is open to them to make a contribution so that the economic inactivity programmes, which we all value enormously, can continue.
Swan.
Northern Ireland Office and Treasury are doing an open book exercise on all departments of the Northern Ireland Executive and how they're spending their block grant allocations. Will the Secretary of State commit to publishing any findings that they find?
It will be a report from the Treasury to the Northern Ireland Executive. It is for the Executive to take the decision, but I say from this dispatch box, I would welcome its publication.
Mike Wood, Shadow Minister.
Mr. Speaker, hospitality adds nearly £2 billion to Northern Ireland's economy, supporting more than 75,000 jobs. But last year, more than 2,000 hospitality workers in Northern Ireland lost their jobs. So does the Secretary of State agree with Unite the Union, of which I know he's a member, that this is the result of the government's disastrous national insurance rises?
The national insurance rise decision that the Chancellor took in her first budget was necessary because of the woeful economic legacy left to this government by its predecessor. And if the honourable gentleman is not prepared to recognise that very basic fact, he's not been paying attention.
We come to Prime Minister's questions. Cat Smith.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An attack on Britain's Jewish community is an attack on all of us. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to say that London ambulances have now replaced the Hatzola ambulances and that the NHS will pay for the permanent replacements. We're also accelerating our social cohesion plan to strengthen our British values of tolerance, decency and respect. Mr. Speaker, we're also strengthening our communities by extending Pride in Place, announcing the locations of 7 new towns and delivering over 300 new school-based nurseries. This is investment in our high streets, more homes and action to support working people with the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, today we will also celebrate the installation of the new Archbishop of Canterbury. It's a key role in our national life, and I wish her every success. This morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for the £47 million that this government has given to Lancashire County Council to repair potholes. However, my constituents still feel like they need a moon buggy to navigate the streets of Lancashire. So would you agree with me that the reformed councillors at Lancashire County Council are clearly wired to the moon if they think they're making effective use of this £47 million?
Well, can I extend my sympathy to residents in Lancashire who have been utterly failed by their reformed county council? And, Mr. Speaker, it's the same picture across the country. In Kent, Reform are cutting social care. In Worcestershire, they're hiking council tax by 9%, despite promising lower taxes. In Staffordshire, the scandals and infighting have been so bad, the Reform are on their 4th leader in 11 months. It's a warning to the whole country. Reform have nothing to offer but chaos, grievance and division.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Prime Minister 6 questions last week, and he didn't answer a single one. He has a duty to this House, Mr. Speaker, to answer the question. Let's see if he can do better this week. I'll start with a simple one. Will the Prime Minister approve the licences for Rosebank and Jackdaw gas fields in the North Sea?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, under statute, that is a matter for the Secretary of State, as she knows, because it's the same arrangements that were in place under the last government. Licences were granted, they were then struck down because of the defects in the process of the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, oil and gas is coming out of the North Sea 24/7. It will be part of the energy mix for many years to come. We fully support all existing oil and gas fields throughout their lifespan, and in November we made changes to extend to allow neighbouring fields to be exploited. But we need to take control of our energy prices. The only way to do that is through renewables. The party opposite used to make that argument. One of their senior figures in 22 said this: it's investment in nuclear and renewables that will reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and keep our consumer costs down. Who was that senior figure? The Leader of the Opposition.
This is not the day to be thrown out with a 2-week break coming. Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, we can have renewables and oil and gas. He says it's a matter for the Secretary of State. He says it's a matter for the Secretary of State. I thought he was the Prime Minister, and he loves to hide behind legal process every single time. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, what a Director of Public... What? Have I...
Order. Mr. Yeltsin, you don't want to test my patience, I'm sure. Come back.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister loves to hide behind legal process. I wonder what a Director of Public Prosecutions would make of the defence. Sorry, I can't produce my WhatsApps. My phone's been stolen. The Jackdaw gas field could be up and running before winter. All that gas would be used here in the UK to heat 1.6 million homes. That is enough to power Norfolk, Suffolk and Essex put together. So will the Prime Minister approve the licences, or is the Energy Secretary running the government?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, legislation has been passed. It's absolutely clear that the quasi-judicial duty under the legislation rests with the Secretary of State. I really think, if she's going to put this challenge to me, she needs to read the legislation. That is the legislation that they applied for 14 years. It's exactly the legislation that they used to put the licences in place, which were then struck down because the process was defective. But, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. When Russia invaded Ukraine, energy prices doubled. The 12-day war, oil prices hit £100 a barrel. In the last 4 weeks, because we're on the fossil fuel roller coaster, everybody has been held to ransom. The only way forward is to go further and faster on renewables. And the leader... Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition's approach is to outsource our foreign policy and let the US decide whether we go to war, to outsource our energy policy to Russia and Iran and let them set the price of energy. I will never do that because it's not in the British national interest.
Mr. Speaker, he is hiding behind so many people. He is the Prime Minister. He can make this decision today. He can. He can. He is so weak, he's the first person to be pushed around by the Energy Secretary. Let me remind him, Mr. Speaker, let me remind him who is on my side. The unions, yes, GMB, they're on my side. Tony Blair. Mr. Speaker, Renewable UK, the very people that he's talking about, they are saying drill in the North Sea. Centrica, Octopus Energy, even Labour MPs. Yeah. Let me quote the Labour member for Pembrokeshire who says, offshoring our carbon emissions might give a sense of moral superiority, but it is simply impoverishing our communities. Yeah. We agree. So why does the Prime Minister think he knows better than everyone else?
Yeah. I'm going to have one more go. The legislation, the statute, the law prescribes the decision maker. They know that. They should be embarrassed that she doesn't even... She's attacking me without having read the legislation. The legislation sets out who the decision maker is. It's the Secretary of State. It is not the Prime Minister. It has to be the Secretary of State, and it's a quasi-judicial process, exactly the process that they ran for many years. And, Mr. Speaker, oil and gas is part of the mix for many years to come, but we do need to get onto renewables. But, Mr. Speaker, we're discussing this because of the war. We need to de-escalate. And that is, yes, we are. That is why I stuck to my principles not to join the war and to act in collective self-defence. I appreciate the Leader of the Opposition doesn't get that. She wanted to jump into the war without regard to the consequences and then do a mother of all U-turns, and now she's stranded without a thought-through position. And, Mr. Speaker, when she was asked at the weekend whether she approved of the war, she said, that's a difficult one. It certainly is if you've got absolutely no judgment.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to let the Prime Minister in on a secret. He's the Prime Minister. He can change the legislation. Hiding behind the Energy Secretary is pathetic. Mr. Speaker, under his Labour government, we buy half the gas we use from Norway. Last year, Norway's Labour government drilled 49 wells in the North Sea. That's what Norway's Labour government did. How many did Britain drill? 0. For the first time since 1964, under his government, Britain drilled no wells. Why is energy security the right policy for Labour in Norway, but the wrong policy for Labour in Britain?
Mr. Speaker, so now our attack is if you changed and passed some different law, you could take the decision which she's challenging me today for not taking. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, all that would do is to slow the process down. Oil and gas is coming out every day. There's a mix of that and renewables. But it's really important, Mr. Speaker, the most important thing to get energy security is to ensure we de-escalate this war. I know where I stand on this. We are not joining the war. She wanted to join the war. She didn't think through the consequences, and now she doesn't know where she stands on the most important issue facing this country at this time.
Mr. Speaker, the Norwegian Prime Minister is doing what is right for his country. If only our Prime Minister would do the same. Stopping all new drilling in the North Sea was a reckless promise when he made it before the election. In the middle of a global energy crisis, it is catastrophic. Experts are predicting a £300 rise in bills in July. Approving new licences would show he was serious about cutting bills. Why won't he do it?
Mr. Speaker, because of the action that we've taken, bills are coming down by up to £100 household bills next month. Then they will be capped for 3 months. That's what we're doing to protect households across the country. And who voted against it? The Tories and Reform, because they just don't get the impact on working people that we will protect.
Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, he says bills are coming down. They are higher than they were when he came into office. And he's talking about, he's talking about what they're doing to help with energy bills. Families and businesses will suffer from the spike in energy costs because of his decisions. He could abolish the green taxes on their bills. He could stop the fuel duty rise. We could drill our own gas in the North Sea. What's he doing? He is planning another giveaway to people on welfare. Yet again, he's taking money from those who do work to give to those who don't. First, we had the budget for Benefit Street. Now it's the bailout for Benefit Street. Doesn't this just prove that they've given up being the Labour Party and they're now just the welfare party?
Mr. Speaker, the spike... they're the ones that double spend on welfare, Mr. Speaker. They're the ones with a broken system. And when we tried to mend it, what did they do? They voted against it.
Order. Mr. Dewhurst, you're tempting my patience. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, she talks about the spike in energy prices. That's because of the war, which I say we shouldn't join, and she says we should join without following through on the consequences. And time again, she gets the big calls absolutely wrong. She wanted to drag us into the war. She got that wrong. She opposed taking control of energy security, and she got that wrong. She opposed our decision to cut energy bills, and she got that wrong. And she seriously thinks that'll make her relevant, and she's got that wrong.
Debbie Abrams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for the new funding for 3 new primary school nurseries in Oldham? But can I ask him specifically about Monday's liaison committee, when he agreed that Israeli settlements in the West Bank are unlawful and that their expansion threatens the viability of a Palestinian state? Will he confirm, as he said he would, that any potential bidder for EU1 contracts from the UK knows that this is unlawful? And will he set out exactly what will happen as a consequence?
Mr. Speaker, let me do that. The Israeli settlements, including the E1 settlement, are a flagrant breach of international law and threaten the viability of the two-state solution. That's why, alongside international partners, we've sanctioned those responsible and their supporters who incite violence. We've consistently urged the Israeli government to act to stop these incidents. We also recommend that settlement products are labelled so that consumers are informed, and will continue to take the necessary action to defend Palestinians and protect the two-state solution.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about Monday's despicable attacks on the Jewish community? Anti-Semitism has no place in our society, and given the potential links with the IRGC, I hope the government will move faster to prescribe them as terrorists. And Mr. Speaker, as a former Secretary of State for Energy who granted licences for oil and gas exploration, can I make a judgment on this argument? The Prime Minister is actually right, and the Leader Opposition is wrong. Mr. Speaker, the law is clear, and I believe in the rule of law. Mr. Speaker, just before President Trump posted about his supposed negotiations with Iran on Monday, traders made hundreds of millions of dollars of extra bets on oil futures. This looks like Donald Trump giving his mates insider information so they can make themselves richer, while his illegal war in Iran makes everyone else poorer. This looks like corruption of the very worst kind. Does the Prime Minister share my fear that Trump is making his war decisions based on what enriches himself and his friends rather than what makes peace in the Middle East?
Prime Minister. Well, can I thank him for his verdict? At least he's read the law that she obviously hasn't read. But, Mr. Speaker, in relation to the traders, we've seen the activity there. What I can say is that all of my decisions are based in the best interests of our country, and that's why I've decided that we will not get dragged into the war, unlike the Leader of the Opposition, and I've decided we will act in collective self-defence of ourselves and our allies. And so I comment on my actions, and they're the principles behind my actions.
Red Davey.
Mr. Speaker, if Trump's war pushes up energy bills by £500, the Chancellor's very narrow plan simply won't cut it. And while I don't fall for the crocodile tears of the leader of the Conservatives, who cheered on this illegal war without a thought for the impact on people's energy bills, and the government is right to reject repeating Liz Truss's blanket cheque approach. But, Mr. Speaker, the government can't ignore the millions of families who don't get benefits, who already face a cost of living crisis. So can the Prime Minister at least guarantee to all those families and pensioners that he won't let their energy bills go up by £500 this year?
Let me say my verdict. He's right about the Leader of the Opposition wanting to join the war, and she's wrong about that. At least he's read the legislation that I'm being challenged on. It does help. It does help. At least he's right. It was the leader of their party that said, let's all go to war without thinking through the consequences. We're now discussing the consequences. Mr. Speaker, in relation to the support, we've made clear the principles, the approach we'll take. We'll keep this under careful review. Energy bills for households are frozen until are capped until the end of June. It's really important I make clear that that's whatever happens in the conflict, because I know the public are concerned about that. We will then put in place appropriate support and look at how we put the principles behind it.
Durham Paffey. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks on the terrible Golders Green attacks? Mr. Speaker, rebuilding trust and integrity in our democracy matters deeply to my constituents in Southampton. Shamefully, it doesn't matter at all to some, particularly the senior Reform UK politician who has been convicted of taking bribes from Russia. Does the Prime Minister agree that there has never been a more urgent need to defend our country from hostile forces who would try to undermine our democracy? And will he set out what concrete steps he is taking to crack down on foreign interference in British politics?
Prime Minister. Can I thank my honourable friend? He makes a powerful point. Mr. Speaker, the Communities Secretary will make a statement later on the Rycroft review, which sets out the stark threats posed by illicit finance. I can tell the House we will act decisively to protect our democracy. That will include a moratorium on all political donations made through cryptocurrencies. I hope that will be welcomed across the House. There is only one party leader who has shown he will say anything, no matter how divisive, if he's paid to do so.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Smash the gangs. That is what the Prime Minister promised us. Trust me, I will stop the boats from coming. But 70,000 later, and 1,000 in the last week, and too many young men that pose a threat to national security, is it not time to admit Smash the Gangs has been a total abject failure, along, frankly, with most of his other policies? Isn't it now time, he told us, as summer approaches, what is Plan B?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, this is from the man and the party that voted against giving law enforcement counter-terrorism-style powers to tackle it. So he wants the grievance, he doesn't want it sorted. And he has absolutely no judgment. He again said, let's join the war, let's all go to war. I want to make it perfectly clear he wants the war. A week later, screeching U-turn, we don't want to go to war. And he says, trust his judgment. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to take anything he says seriously. He promised lower tax, and now Reform councils are hiking council tax by 9%. In Worcestershire, this is what he said about Worcestershire. He said, we took control of a virtually bankrupt council. I wish we hadn't bothered. He asked for people's votes, and then he abandons them. Reform don't want to solve problems, they only want to exploit them. I am thankful for the opportunity to change this country for the better. He says he wishes he hadn't bothered winning councils, because they're an absolute disgrace.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for the £35 million of funding announced this week to transform Crucible Theatre and keep the world...
Order! I want to hear this member's question, especially those who are interested in snooker. Dr. Rachel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for the £35 million of funding announced this week to transform the Crucible Theatre and keep the World Snooker Championship at the heart of Sheffield? I want my constituents to be able to enjoy this fantastic tournament day and night, travelling by tram train from Stocksbridge to Sheffield via Outerbridge, Warncliffe Side and Deepcar. I'm grateful for our South Yorkshire Mayor, Oliver Coppard, for kick-starting these plans. Will the Prime Minister work with me and the South Yorkshire Mayor to ensure we get spades in the ground for a tram train extension to Stocksbridge as soon as possible so my constituents can enjoy the snooker?
Mr. Speaker, I see Reform of Works walked out. They obviously realise they're absolutely snookered. Mr. Speaker.
No, I don't think so.
Sheffield and the Crucible Theatre are the beating heart of snooker, and I am delighted that we'll host the World Snooker Championships for many years to come, because this is what Labour stands for, investing in things that make us proud of the places that we live. Can I reassure my honourable friend we're working closely with South Yorkshire Combined Authority on better transport links, providing over £1.4 billion to spend on their priorities, which could include a new tram fleet, more modern stops or deliver extensions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I met my constituents Rob and Lizzie at the King's Arms Hotel in Melrose, which we run as part of a family business of 10 hotels across Scotland. They employ over 250 people, but their national insurance bill is going up by £288,000 because of Labour's tax on jobs. We need to get Britain working again, but this government's policies are doing the opposite. Does the Prime Minister understand the damage that he is doing to our economy, and how does he expect businesses like this to survive?
Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the steps we've taken have been to repair the damage that was done by the previous government, and we took those steps, and the spring statement showed the results of those steps. Inflation coming down, interest rates coming down, and the economy stabilised. I know they don't understand that because they blew up the economy in the first place.
Just giving the Mayor. Tony on Tony Atson.
Mr. Speaker, my constituents Tony and Rebecca Wadley received insulation under the Tory government's Eco4 scheme, but the work left their home with black mould, leaks, damp and even a solar fire, damage now requiring £100,000 worth of repairs. Rebecca is suicidal, Tony has had pneumonia, their asthmatic son cannot live at home, and like many others they are required under the rules to use the same contractor responsible for the faulty work, only up to £20,000. Now, will the Prime Minister commit to overhauling this broken system so that my constituents and many others can receive fully funded repairs carried out by a competent builder?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, an independent audit of the previous government's failed insulation schemes show unacceptable levels of failings. We've acted to make sure poor quality installations are fixed. It is important that those responsible are held to account for the cost of remediating the issues. I do recognise that there are some complicated cases. I'll make sure a Minister looks at her constituent's case and that urgent action is taken.
Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Prime Minister says that he's concerned about the cost of living. So can he explain why he allowed his government minister to give permission to reform-led Worcestershire County Council to inflict that 9% council tax hike on my constituents?
Mr. Speaker, Reform have to take responsibility for their decisions, and they've moved out.
John Trickett.
Mr. Speaker, two members of the same family in my constituency recently suffered serious health problems. The NHS was there for them, as you would expect, and they're both hopefully now on the road to recovery. But the recently departed honourable member had a different idea, that we should have an insurance-based health policy, an American-style policy, and that family, whose cost would have been $1.2 million, would have been crucified financially by what happened. So will the Prime Minister take the opportunity to say that our principles on the NHS are that it's universal for everybody, that wealth does not give you privileged access, and that this is a public service, not a private service?
Prime Minister.
I'm deeply sorry to hear about the case that he raises. We are the party of the NHS, and we will always fight to ensure that it remains free at the point of use. Mr. Speaker, we inherited an NHS on its knees, but we are seeing progress. Waiting lists are down. Patient satisfaction is improving. We got the best ambulance response times for half a decade. There's much more to do, but we're delivering the investment that's needed, and it was opposed by who? The Tories and the now departed Reform.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Susan suffered horrific, unimaginable, lifelong injury from a pelvic mesh implant. She lost her business, her marriage, her health, and lives in constant 24-hour pain. I'd like to congratulate the new Minister for Public Health on her appointment after her tireless campaigning on this issue, which has clearly been recognised. But more than 2 years after the Hughes report set out clear recommendations for redress, thousands of women like Susan are still waiting for a government response. So can the Prime Minister tell Susan and the thousands of other women like her how much longer they will have to wait?
Minister. Can I thank her for raising Susan's case, and it's really important that she does so, and I'm deeply sorry for the enduring harm that patients have suffered. Ministers have met campaigners and the Patient Safety Commissioner to discuss their recommendations, and I can assure her we will provide a full response to the Hughes report recommendations at the earliest opportunity. And I'm happy for ministers to update her on the actions we've taken and to discuss the particular case that she's raised with me.
Dr. Ellison-Gardner.
I recently met with Graham and Malcolm, who bravely shared their lived experience of addiction to monkey dust, a synthetic cathinone causing significant problems in Stoke-on-Trent. They shared their challenges to recovery caused by a lack of joined-up working between local services, including mental health and housing. I am now setting up a task force to address these gaps and to learn from excellent local projects such as Sphere. Will the Prime Minister meet with me to discuss how, together, as a country, we can tackle this pernicious drug?
Can I thank her for her work? She's right to highlight the growing threat posed by dangerous synthetic drugs. Alongside deploying new detection methods at the border to seize drugs, we're investing in better mental health support and drug addiction treatment, with almost $26 million for Stoke-on-Trent. I'll ask the Health Minister to discuss her important work with her.
Peter Fortune.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as we move towards the Easter recess, I'm sure the Prime Minister's thoughts are turning to the miracle of resurrection. But constituents in Bromley and Biggin Hill have asked me to resurrect something, and that is cash in shops. 1 in 7 shops in the last year has moved to a cashless organisation, which risks leaving behind those on low income or the elderly. And indeed, we've heard today of the risk of moving to digital devices for our economic liberty, as mobile phones could be lost or stolen or other. So what is the Prime Minister doing to ensure that nobody is left behind in a cashless society?
Well, it is really important that nobody is left behind in a cashless society. The vast majority are moving online, but we need to remember that some don't want to or can't, and we have to make sure there's provision in place for them as well, and I'm grateful to him for raising that.
Matt Turman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has shown that it takes seriously the issues of justice and violence against women and girls. In my constituency, I have been made aware of a case where 2 children of a convicted paedophile have been trying to change their surname but can't because both parents have to agree. They are caught in a trap not of their own making. Will my right honourable friend agree to meet with me and all the relevant minister to hear how the legal system is denying justice to these children and what we can do about it? Thank you.
Can I thank him for raising this? And it is shocking and horrifying to hear what these children have to go through. I'm absolutely clear in my mind that should not be happening. And I can inform you, I've instructed the Justice Ministers to look at what they can do. They are going to review the payments and see what else they can do. And so I'm really pleased he's raised this, so we can now act on it, and I'll make sure that he gets the meeting that he's asking for.
Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are responsible worldwide and here in the United Kingdom for the rise of anti-Semitism, inciting extreme Islam attacks, and at the same time attacking dissident Iranians and British citizens, as well as fomenting all sorts of hate marches. A very simple question. We are now at war with Iran, whether we like it or not. But the reality for us, therefore, is that we have never dealt with this organisation. And I simply ask the Prime Minister, it doesn't matter, it's not party political, I simply ask him, can he make the decision now that they will proscribe this brutal bunch of thugs and send them packing or arrest them and put them in jail now, right now, get rid of this organisation?
I thank him for raising this. It is really important and serious. He knows that we've sanctioned the IRGC in its entirety, and we've posed over 230 sanctions since coming into office. The existing prescription powers are not designed for a state organisation, but we do keep this under review, as did the last government.
Sarah Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 16th of July 2005, Private Leon Spicer and Private Philip Hewitt, both from Tamworth, and Second Lieutenant Richard Shearer from Nuneaton, were tragically killed in Iraq. More than 20 years on, our communities continue to remember their service and reflect on the ultimate sacrifice that they made. The Staffordshire 3 group, chaired by Anthony Firth, has worked tirelessly to fundraise for a memorial, which is due to be unveiled next month, and to which the Prime Minister is, of course, warmly invited. Will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to these 3 brave men and in commending the Staffordshire 3 group for their dedication in ensuring that their legacy is never forgotten?
Well, can I thank my honourable friend for the invitation? And can I join her in paying tribute to Private Leon Spencer, Private Philip Hewitt, and Second Lieutenant Richard Shearer? Their bravery and sacrifice in defence of our values will never be forgotten, and I'm delighted to hear a memorial will be unveiled. Can I also pay tribute to all those serving today in the Middle East, shooting down threats from our allies and protecting our people?
Iqbal Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I also associate myself with the Prime Minister's remark about the attack on the Jewish community in Golders Green. There is no place for hatred, anti-Semitism or violence of any kind against individuals. Mr. Speaker, an independent panel of senior judges found no basis for misconduct proceedings against the British Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Karim Khan, King's Counsel. Yet reports suggest that elements within the court's governing body are seeking to disregard those findings, while ICC officials continue to face external pressure and sanctions. Therefore, given the UK's commitment to the rule of law and as a human rights lawyer himself, what steps will the Prime Minister set out to defend the independence of the ICC and to support British nationals carrying out international judicial roles?
Prime Minister.
I'm not going to comment on the internal proceedings of the court. As he knows, we support the court. We are party to the treaty and there are legal obligations that flow from that.
It's in order for David Burton-Sampson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In my constituency of Southend Western Lee, we have a cohesive and diverse community with a significant Jewish population and a thriving Muslim community and many others from various different backgrounds, all living together and supporting each other. I was therefore appalled to learn of the arson attack against the Jewish community in Golders Green this week, and I'm deeply concerned at the Shadow Justice Secretary's outrageous comments last week about the community iftar in Trafalgar Square, seemingly supported by the leader of the opposition. Can the Prime Minister assure me and my worried constituents that he and his government will do all they can to stamp out hate and hate speech in our communities?
Can I say again what a shocking anti-Semitic attack it was in Golders Green and be absolutely clear that an attack on British Jews is an attack on all of us. And, Mr. Speaker, on Monday morning I met Jewish community leaders to talk through what we could do on ambulances, on security and on the social cohesion plan. Can I also say this? I was really struck by the fact that the Jewish community came out last week against the comments of the Shadow Justice Secretary, standing in solidarity with Muslims who wanted to pray in Trafalgar Square. And equally, on Monday at the Eid event we had, Muslims stood in solidarity with our Jewish community. That is Britain, contrary to what the Shadow Justice Secretary said last week, supported by the Leader of the Opposition. That is how far they've fallen.
Mr. Speaker, Thames Water is lurching from crisis to crisis. Last year, it was let off record fines for pumping sewage into our rivers by Ofwat. It is allowed to do so under rules that are laid out in the Water Act of 1991. Will he consider scrapping those rules to stop Ofwat letting water companies off the hook?
Prime Minister. Can I thank him for raising this? And it is deeply concerning, and we're looking at what more we can do, because it's been too much of too concern for too long, and so we need to act.
Thomas.
Mr. Speaker, as the COVID inquiry graphically laid bare last week, the NHS was starved of the investment it needed under the party opposite. Nowhere more so than at Northwick Park Hospital, whose brave and extraordinary staff worked round the clock during COVID, looking after many of my constituents. Given the very welcome substantial investment that the government has committed to improve the NHS, will my right honourable friend encourage the Health Secretary to support plans for a new intensive care unit at Northwick Park?
Prime Minister. The COVID report is a stark reminder, Mr. Speaker, of the extraordinary efforts of health workers to keep this country safe. We are delivering record investment and reform that our NHS needs. And whilst decisions about local infrastructure are made by integrated care boards, I'll make sure that he gets a meeting with the Minister to discuss his particular care. Today, Mr. Speaker, NHS satisfaction rates have risen for the first time since the pandemic. That is the difference that a Labour government is making.
Neil Shaftesbury-Hurst's final question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On the 21st of November of last year, Robert Clancy, a hugely valued and much loved member of my staff, took his own life. He was 29. While successive governments have done a great deal to deal with the scourge of suicide in this country, there is much more that can be done. Will the Prime Minister personally commit to meet with me to discuss how we can prevent others experiencing the unimaginable pain that Rob's family and friends have endured?
Prime Minister.
Can I thank him for raising the case of Robert Clancy? We are happy to work across the House on all that we can do in relation to suicide. I'm pleased that we've been able to put in place a strategy. That is the action of this government, but it needs to be the action of all of us. And I'll make sure he gets the meeting that he is asking for. And thank him again for raising this case. It's really important that he does so.
Please, Prime Minister's questions.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
I can hear you. Don't worry. Unfortunately. Just let everyone's walking in front of you. It doesn't do you any benefit or me. Sir Edmund Lee, point of order.
Can I refer you to paragraph 22.9 of Erskine May, which stresses the primary importance of ministerial responsibility. Now, we've got to admit that Prime Ministers have always tried to dodge questions at Prime Minister's question time, and you're not responsible for the answers they give. But what we have seen in recent weeks is not just dodging questions, but every question asked to the Prime Minister, he refers to the Leader of the Opposition's policies. This is not Leader of the Opposition policies, it's Prime Minister's question. And the whole...
Can I just say, once again, I said last week,